他们不才，想试上一试。
不愧是上古10大神境之一，前面2重阵法只是障眼法，这第3重才是正邪。唯有以自身神识投入，抽丝剥茧，方可解开。
Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man led the way, and the party quickly traversed through the Mulan Plains. Following along the border of the Mulan Plains, they headed west and arrived before a barren, ashen-grey mountain. It was only several hundred meters tall and was devoid of any vegetation. Han Li and the others glanced at the mountain with astonishment. Master Cangkun's cave residence was such an unremarkable mountain? The spiritual qi was also sparse here. If Marquis Nanlong hadn't led the way, they definitely wouldn't have arrived in such a place. Alright, here we are. Fellow Daoistune and I will open the outer layer of restrictions. Follow us closely. Marquis Nanlong gave the party a word of warning before leading the way alongside the white-robed old man. When they arrived at the center of the mountain, they each took out a small flag. These 2 flags were a meter long. One sparkled with dazzling green light, and the other was yellow and fluttered with faint talisman characters. One could tell they were unordinary at first glance. The others couldn't help but hold their breaths in anticipation as they attentively gazed at the 2's actions. The 2 began to softly mutter incantations without pause. The 2 flags simultaneously began to twinkle with light and gradually began to tremble as if attempting to break free from their grasp. Go! At nearly the same instant, Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man released their flags at nearly the same time. In a flash of brilliance, the small flags dug into some portion of the earth and disappeared without trace. A short moment later, there was no sign of movement. Han Li and the others all revealed traces of doubt. The old woman signed and was about to ask a question when the earth began to tremble. Most of the party was unable to keep their balance amongst the trembling ground. However, the following scene left Han Li startled. As the ground fiercely trembled, a fine crack spread from the top of the mountain down the base of the mountain. White light began to shine from the crack as if the mountain were split into 2. Han Li and company felt their breaths turn cold. Their hearts felt complete awe at the sight of Marquis Nanlong and fellow Daoistune splitting open the mountain. Despite their shock, they still managed to appear calm as they observed what was happening. The 2 with the lowest cultivation, Wang Chan and Yang Ruyan, stood behind Wang Tuangu in complete silence. After Han Li coldly glanced at the 2, he turned his sights back on the mountain. It seemed he wouldn't have an opportunity to slay Wang Chan before they acquired the treasure. As Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man continued their incantations for a moment more, the mountain eventually split into 2, creating a huge crevice that was over 30 meters wide. A limestone stairway laid within. Let us go. With a trace of excitement on the old man's face, he led the way. As for the other founder of the party, Marquis Nanlong remained behind with a smile. Han Li felt his heart stir. It seems that this white-clothed old man was quite the character to have Marquis Nanlong actually guard the rear. The others saw this and glanced at each other, but they all tactfully kept silent on the matter. Instead, they calmly walked inside. The stairs lasted for quite a while. White moonstones were embedded in each side, but the further they descended, the colder it became. Not long after, they were already 300 meters deep into the mountain, and the moonlight stone's faint white light had soon turned into a faint green for some unknown reason. This caused the descending passage to appear ominous. When Han Li saw this, he frowned and unconsciously pulled away from the tan cultivator ahead of it. If anything happened, the distance would give him enough time to react. Han Li wasn't the only one to do this. Apart from Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man, the other cultivators began to keep a distance of about 30 meters from each other. Marquis Nanlong and the old man surnamed Yun clearly knew that the other cultivators were actually taking precautions against them. However, they deliberately ignored this and continued forward without a trace of dissatisfaction. After the time it took to finish a meal, Han Li and company had arrived in a large mysterious hall. The reason why it was mysterious was because it appeared as if the entire hall was created from a giant hollowed boulder of jade. Its sparkling and translucent blue light appeared extremely beautiful. Now that they stood within the 100-meter wide hall, everyone wore a face of amazement. This material obviously couldn't have been true jade. Once they swept their spiritual sense past the walls, they were promptly repelled. It was incapable of seeing past them. Han Li wasn't alarmed this. He used his spiritual sense to probe the other parts of the hall only to find that they were all the same. Han Li inwardly pondered with a sense of apprehension and turned his gaze to the other cultivators in the room. Wang Tuangu and the others also frowned. It was clear that they also found this to be troublesome. Could this be where the wondrous soul restriction was located? It seemed Marquis Nanlong wasn't he exaggerating. Just as Han Li's mind began to wonder, the entire hall began to violently shake and they heard a series of huge tremors from behind them. The old woman and the others hastily turned their heads in alarm. They discovered that the stairway had unknowingly disappeared and was replaced with walls of sparkling blue light. A moment later, the entire hall became deathly quiet. "Fellow Deus Nanlong, what is the meaning of this?" the Tan cultivator asked with a sullen expression. The other cultivators also became vigilant as they glanced at Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man, their eyes flickering around the room. Marquis Nanlong did indeed display the slightest surprise and calmly said, "Be at ease, fellow Taoists. The outside restrictions were merely reactivated, causing the mountain to close once more. The last time we came here, this also happened. We merely had to wait 3 days until the restriction strength was at its weakest before leaving the mountain. We won't be trapped here. Moreover, with the outer restrictions shut, we have no fear of spell warriors discovering us." While the others were somewhat skeptical of that explanation, they appeared visibly relieved. So long as Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man were in the hall with them, they had no fear of any trap being set or any malicious planning. The Tan cultivator saluted and said, "So it was like that. It seems I was being rash." Fellow Deus Nanlong chuckled and casually said, "It's nothing. Let us hurry to break the restriction. Last time, fellow Deus Jun and I returned dejected from failure. This wondrous soul formation isn't easy to break." The old woman's wrinkly face broke into a smile and she said, "Is the formation truly that difficult to break? I've acquired a treasure in the past that was specialized in breaking many restrictions and barriers. Perhaps we can save ourselves the trouble and simply use this treasure to break the restriction?" A trace of joy flickered from the white-clothed old man's expression and he immediately replied, "Ye? If Lady Tai possesses such an exceptional treasure, please give it a try. Our method of using spiritual sense to dissolve the restriction isn't guaranteed to be successful." Revealing a trace of delight, Marquis Nanlong said, "That's right. Fellow Deus Tai, please go ahead." The old woman chuckled and a trace of spirit flickered from her dull eyes. "Since you fellow Taoists have both agreed, I'll be blunt. If this somehow manages to luckily break the restrictions, will I have first pick alongside you two as well?" The other cultivators had slightly changed expressions after hearing this. Marquis Nanlong revealed slight surprise, but after glancing at the white-clothed old man, he suddenly said to the others, "Regardless of whether it be Lady Tai or anyone else, so long as you succeed in breaking the formation, they will have priority selection for a treasure after us too. What does everyone think?" Once that was said, Marquis Nanlong swept his gaze past the party. Han Li and Wang Tiangu both appeared indifferent to this, but the Tan man and the stern-faced cultivator appeared displeased. Regardless, no objections were raised. Marquis Nanlong smiled and decisively said, "The others have no objections. Lady Tai, you may take action. Since that is the case, I will be making an attempt." The old woman was inwardly delighted. She held quite some confidence in her treasure. So long as it wasn't an intangible formation like an illusion formation, she had a large chance of success. Why else would she take the risk of angering the rest of the party? Lady Tai flung out her sleeve and took out an object that was only several inches long. This fire-red object was narrow at the front and thick at the back, resembling something like a spike. The old man paid no attention to the others and spat a mist of blinding light onto the spike. A short moment later, the spike flickered with red light and began to emit waves of heat that quickly spread throughout the hall. As experienced as they were, the Marquis and the white-clothed old man immediately knew that this object was unordinary and unconsciously took a few steps away from the woman as they glanced at her spike. Wang Chan and Yang Ruyan revealed shock upon contacting the heat wave and hastily enveloped themselves in a crimson barrier. They felt their bodies scorch. As late core formation cultivators, they were unable to endure such temperatures. With a flash of white light, the spike began to crackle. Han Li and the others began to keenly gaze at the spike, discovering that the spike's flames faintly pulsed with white lightning. This was an ancient treasure with the dual attributes of lightning and fire. The cultivators looked upon the old woman with varied emotions. The woman ignored this and deeply glanced at the blue wall in front of her. Her wrist shook and she thrust the lightning fire spike into it. Fiery light flourished and muffled booms sounded out. The spike began to swiftly revolve above her head and soon its speed increased to the point where it became a blur. The faint red-white blur quickly flew throughout the hall, barely able to be seen. The cultivators in the hall all watched with amazement. Han Li was particularly alarmed at the sight. This was the first time he had seen such a swift ancient treasure. Even nascent soul cultivators would find it difficult to defend against it. If he were to fight against such a treasure, he would have no way of dealing with it apart from the thunderstorm wings. The old woman pointed at the faint blur of light in the air and solemnly shouted, "Go!" Suddenly, red and white light flickered and the lightning fire spike fiercely struck the blue crystal wall in front of the old woman. With a muffled bang, lightning and flames ruptured and enveloped the side of the wall. The resulting light made the scene blinding to the eye. Han Li's pupils contracted. Although he wasn't able to see it, the spike's spiritual chi fluctuations were quite powerful. It was no wonder why Lady Tai held such confidence in it. But against the wondrous soul restriction, this power isn't he. Before Han Li finished his thoughts, the lightning fire had already faded away. The spike was gently floating several inches away from the wall, but the wall appeared completely unscathed. Marquis Nanlong revealed a trace of disappointment, but then he chuckled and said, "While the might of this magic treasure is quite powerful, it still lacks the strength to break through the wondrous soul restriction. Thank you for your trouble, fellow Daoist Tai. Are there any other fellow Taoists that wish to make an attempt to break the restriction?" Unresigned, the woman snorted and said, "When did I say that this was my treasure's true power? It was merely a probing strike. It seems anything less than its complete stress won't do." Marquis Nanlong's eyes brightened and he happily said, "Oh. If fellow Daoist Tai still wishes to continue her attempt, please don't hesitate to do so." The old woman didn't reply and promptly held her hands in an incantation gesture. The floating lightning fire spike returned above the old woman's head. Then under the influence of the old woman's incantation gestures, it began to revolve in place. Its speed began to quickly increase, slowly merging lightning and blazing fire as it emitted a strange hum. The other spirits were shaken as they stared at the scene. A short moment later, the lightning fire spike appeared to have truly fused together its lightning and flames. Bizarre scarlet lightning continuously arced from its surface. This scene caused Han Li's heart to stir. He made a faint connection in his mind and he sunk into thought. The others were also amazed by this scene. They began to think higher of the lightning fire spike. "Break," the old woman muttered. With the sound of tearing wind, the lightning fire spike brimming with scarlet lightning disappeared from sight and struck the crystal wall once more. This time, there was no eruption of lightning or fire. There was only a light pop. With assistance from its high-speed rotations and scarlet lightning, it was able to drill into the crystal wall with only a moment of resistance. Once the drill bore into the wall, its speed greatly decreased, but under the influence of the old woman's incantation gestures, it slowly pulled forward and drilled with all its might. A short moment later, the white-clothed old man and Marquis Nanlong revealed delight. Wang Tuangu and the others watched the scene with spirited gazes and nervousness. It was unknown whether they hoped the old woman would succeed or fail. Han Li inwardly scoffed and wore a faint smirk on his face. No one else noticed Han Li's change of expression, except for Yang Ruyan, who had unintentionally glanced in Han Li's direction. The woman was startled for a moment and revealed a trace of bewilderment. When the lightning fire spike drilled about a foot into the crystal wall, it met calamity. The originally still crystal wall had suddenly shined with blue radiance. Countless threads of scorching white light emerged from the wall and tightly wrapped around the lightning fire spike in a profuse glimmering display. With a huge boom, the lightning fire spike exploded and the resulting light faded away, revealing the wall to be completely restored. The old woman's face paled, but soon, furious alarm could be seen from her face. The fire lightning spike was an ancient treasure she had expended vast effort into acquiring. It was impossible for her to not feel distress over having it so easily destroyed. For a time, she felt a burning sensation at the pit of her stomach as if she were about to spit up blood. The others were dumbstruck by the sight and were quite alarmed. As for Yang Ruyan, she glanced at Han Li with astonishment and wore a pensive expression. Fortunately, the old woman was an exceptional character. After a moment of tense rage, she took a deep breath and was able to calm down her raging blood. She turned her heads to the other and bitterly smiled. "It seems I've made quite a fool of myself. The wondrous soul restriction is truly worthy of its name as one of the top 10 ancient formations. I have no method of destroying it. However, you fellow Taoists possess vast abilities. Perhaps one of you may be able to break the restriction." Once that was said, she took several steps back in a gesture of resignation. Marquis Nanlong's smile had long disappeared and he could only sigh. Despite fellow Daoist Tai's efforts, she failed. A truly unfortunate matter indeed. Are there any other fellow Taoists that are willing to give it a try? Once that was said, Marquis Nanlong glanced at Wang Tuangu in particular. After all, he was a spell formation grandmaster renowned throughout the cultivation world. But since the others witnessed the destruction of the old woman's ancient treasure, any interest in making an attempt had been thoroughly extinguished. With their attempts only ending in tremendous failure, who would dare to risk their treasures? Wang Chenggu remained silent as he stood at the corner of the hall. Although he did possess some understanding of ancient spell formations, he had yet to encounter something on the level of the 10 great ancient restrictions, let alone have a method to dissolve it. As such, he wasn't about to volunteer and make a fool of himself. Han Li, who had remained silent throughout this, suddenly spoke, "As untalented as I am, I would like to make an attempt. How about it?" He had spoke about the topic rather lightly. These words had greatly surprised the rest of the party. Marquis Nanlong was particularly surprised, but he said, "Of course. Please go ahead, fellow Daoist Han." Han Li promptly took several steps forward and approached a side of the wall that hadn't been struck. When Wang Chan saw this, a trace of derision could be seen from his face once he recovered from his shock. He uttered a few sound transmissions to Yang Ruyan, but she hardly gave any reaction. As for Wang Chenggu, he maintained a calm exterior, but he was filled with bewilderment at the idea of Han Li breaking the formation. Han Li stood in front of the stone wall and didn't immediately take action. Instead, he raised his hand and extended his finger. He circulated spiritual power throughout his body and emitted a streak of light from his fingertip that was several inches long. In a pulse of light, he swept the azure streak past the surface of the crystal wall to no effect. Han Li wasn't discouraged by this and simply enveloped his hand in a layer of azure spirit chi. He then extended his 5 fingers and placed his palm against the wall. He was completely motionless as if he were sensing something. Han Li's strange actions were completely unfathomable to the cultivators watching him, but none stepped forward to bother him. Completely unbeknownst to the party, Han Li's eyes were faintly glowing with blue light as he deeply peered into the crystal wall. He seemed to be examining it with all his ability. After a quarter hour passed in this regard, the others didn't reveal any impatience or take the initiative to act. Han Li then sighed. The blue light disappeared from his eyes and he reached towards his storage pouch without any hesitation and took out a pile of over 10 various colored formation flags. The white-clothed old man quickly recovered from his surprise and excitedly asked, "So fellow Daoist Han was also proficient in the art of spell formations? Could it be your thinking for breaking a formation with a formation? Could it be you understand the mysteries of the wondrous soul restriction?" Han Li nonchalantly replied, "Understand what mystery? I merely studied in a few ancient formations of a similar type and want to give it a try." He soon spat a breath of azure chi onto the flags, causing them to brightly shine. Under Han Li's command, they flew out from his hand and pointed their flags in the direction of the crystal wall, then floated motionlessly in the air. Han Li formed an incantation gesture with his hands and the dozen formation flags began to hover and arrange themselves in a strange formation as they faced the wall. It appeared incomprehensible. At that moment, Han Li began to softly utter an incantation and a dozen incantation seals flew from his hands, accurately striking each of the flags in the formation. The flags trembled for a moment before shining with various colored lights and shooting out threads of light that wrapped around each other. Wang Chenggu and the other cultivators familiar with spell formations frowned. They felt this spell formation seemed somewhat familiar while knowing that they hadn't actually seen such a formation before. They all couldn't help but secretly analyze it as if wishing to discover its secret. As if unwilling to allow the other cultivators to study the profound aspects of the spell formation, he softly shouted and had the spell formation emit blinding white light. Those that were staring at the spell formation were caught off guard and were forced to turn their gazes away. While these old eccentrics were startled, they secretly channeled spiritual power through their eyes and immediately opened them once more. As a result, they couldn't help but reveal shock. They saw the flag formation was already embedded into the crystal wall without any mishap. It appeared almost as if the flags had grown out of the wall. At that moment, Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man revealed delight. Their confidence in Han Li grew. Wang Chenggu's expression changed for just a moment, but Wang Chan, who stood behind him, revealed a complex amazement and was entirely amazed. Yang Ruyan slightly frowned and wore a puzzled expression as she gazed at the spell formation on the wall. Han Li took a few steps forward towards the wall and pressed his hands against it, his fingers faintly shining with azure light. At that same moment, the spell formation on the wall seemed to respond as the center of the formation began to glow with rainbow light. The light became increasingly brilliant and gradually spread to cover the entire wall in a magnificent display. As everyone was entranced by the scene, Han Li pulled his hands away from the crystal wall and his figure blurred, reappeared at a neighboring wall. After examining it for a long while, he took out another set of formation flags and arranged the flags differently from the first formation. After they flickered with white light, they embedded themselves in the crystal wall once more. Because the cultivators were prepared and protected their eyes with spiritual light, they were able to clearly observe how easily the flags had pierced into the walls under Han Li's command. They couldn't help but click their tongues in surprise. Placing down the spell formations onto each of the 4 walls using this same method took no less than an hour. The other cultivators didn't reveal any impatience. They all knew that dissolving such a profound ancient restriction wasn't something that could bed one easily. Having arranged a spell formation on each of the walls, Han Li walked to the center of the hall and raised his hand, revealing a green formation plate. He struck the plate with several complex incantation seals, causing both the plate and the 4 crystal walls to simultaneously twinkle with various colored light and pulse in pattern. Han Li didn't bother to glance around him and simply lowered his head, uttering, "Break." In the same instant he spoke, the light surged and released an ear-piercing cry. It became increasingly loud to the point where it sounded as if a myriad of birds had simultaneously cried out. A huge rumble shook the room and the entire hall grew dim as the lights vanished. The others then discovered that the crystal walls surrounding them had unexpectedly vanished, only to be replaced with ordinary stone walls. One of the stone walls even had a stone gate that was 20 meters tall and 12 meters wide. A trace of joy flickered from Marquis Nanlong's face and he excitedly said, "I didn't expect that fellow Daoist Han was so skilled in spell formations." "Ha ha! Great! Fellow Daoist Yun and I will naturally keep our word. After we both get our pick, fellow Daoist will have priority in choosing a treasure." The white-clothed old man wore a smile when he saw the stone gate before him. His eyes were filled with a fervor. In his excitement, the tan cultivator restlessly said, "Brother Nanlong, let us see what lays inside. Surely there can't be more restrictions inside." Marquis Nanlong confidently said, "Be at ease, there can't be. According to what Master Cangkun left behind, the cave resident should only have 2 layers of restrictions." He then stepped forward without another word and swept his sleeve past the stone gate, easily opening it. The many cultivators felt the last of their worries disappear when they saw them and began to follow Marquis Nanlong outside. Once the old woman arrived outside the stone gate, she yelled in astonishment, "What is this?" Han Li and the rest of the party appeared astounded by what lay beyond the gate. There was a hall that was several times larger than the previous one, but there was also an exquisitely styled pavilion at the center of the large hall. This pavilion was created from translucent white jade. It was over 30 meters tall and had only 2 stories. On top of its 10-meter gate were the words Jade Pier Pavilion written in silver characters. Regardless of how it could be said, a pavilion at the center of the hall was an odd sight. There was a jet black altar table that stood in front of the pavilion with a sparkling meter-long scroll that laid on top of it. As for the rest of the hall, it was completely vacant and lacked any other gates. Everyone instantly assumed that the treasure was to be hidden inside the pavilion. After Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man glanced at each other, the old man walked towards the altar table with caution. The rest of the party felt their hearts stir, but they raised no objections. They simply calmly observed the old man's actions. The white-clothed old man hesitated for a moment before spitting out a mist of white light. The mist wrapped around the scroll and raised it up. With a series of turns, the scroll opened to reveal the portrait of a sword-bearing scholar that was gazing to the sky. "That is Master Cangkun?" the stern-faced cultivator asked with astonishment. Wang Chenggu's gaze flickered past the portrait and said, "It seems so. However, there should be a reason why it was enshrined there. However, it doesn't seem to be particularly precious in and of itself." After a moment of thought, the old man slowly said, "I'll be giving it a try then." His 2 hands formed an incantation seal and he flicked his finger. Several red spell seals struck the portrait, causing it to brightly shine with silver light for just a moment. It then faded away as if nothing had occurred. The white-clothed old man hesitantly said, "How strange. It is possible that this is but a simple portrait." After a moment of silence, Marquis Nanlong suggested, "Since that is the case, let us put away the portrait for now. First let us search for the other treasures first and distribute them. Does anyone have any objections?" The old woman glanced at the portrait and chuckled, "I have no objections. Let us follow fellow Daoist Nanlong's suggestion." Since the others have yet to see the other treasures, they all agreed. As a result, the white-clothed old man rolled the scroll back up and carefully placed it in his storage pouch. As the Marquis looked at the pavilion, he excitedly said, "Let us go into the pavilion and have a look." The party walked around the altar table and arrived in front of the tightly shut pavilion. Marquis Nanlong then impatiently pushed open its gate with a creak. Before Han Li and the others could enter, they were met with a blinding light. It blinded them for a long while before their vision could adjust. Once they could see once more, they spotted 3 slender blackwood shelves on the first floor. They were filled with the items that had emitted the dazzling light. The party was instantly filled with joy at the sight. But as each of them were experienced and cunning, they didn't dare to commit any mistaken actions out of greed. With an odd expression, he slowly turned around and saw Yang Ruyan standing behind him. Han Li calmly replied, "The yin focus herb is different from other herbs. Its medicinal properties is strongest only when it is 100 years old. Now that it has reached such a vast age, it no longer has a use." Han Li's gaze swept over the room and found that Wang Chan was closely following after Wang Tuangu. He was excitedly whispering something with his second uncle, and wasn't he paying any attention to what Yang Ruyan was doing. Yang Ruyan smiled and gazed at Han Li with bright, wondering eyes. Didn't he think that Senior Han was proficient not only in spell formations, but medicine pill refinement as well? You truly have my admiration. Han Li grew greatly vigilant from the woman's eagerness to chat. He bluntly replied, "Pill refinement. Only to a minor degree. However, fellow Daoist Yang, do you know of my relationship with your husband? Do you not fear arousing your husband's resentment from speaking with me?" Yang Ruyan's smile faded away and she said with a helpless tone, "Of course I am aware. But I still vainly hope to dissolve the hatred between Senior and my lord husband." Han Li raised his brow and a sneer flickered on his face. "Dissolve? Your Devil Dao sects and my Heavenly Dao alliance always had a hostile relationship. What is there to dissolve?" Yang Ruyan bitterly smiled in response and began to speak when Marquis Nanlong suddenly called out, "Come over, fellow Daoists. We will first be distributing the treasures of this floor before heading up." Once this was said, Han Li paid no more heed to Yang Ruyan and walked over. Yang Ruyan's beautiful face flickered with several emotions in response before gracefully following after him. When Wang Chan saw that Yang Ruyan was following after Han Li, he appeared slightly bewildered. But after giving Yang Ruyan a deep glance, he shrewdly decided to keep silent on the matter. As for Wang Tuangu, he turned a blind eye to the matter. Marquis Nanlong had already gathered all the items onto one shelf and calmly said, "There are 6 ancient treasures, 10 magic treasures, and 8 shares of materials and medicine pills that are organized in accordance to their value. Of course, what everyone wants the most will be the ancient treasures. After all, their full strength can be displayed without any refinement. However, these magic treasures aren't common items either. They were all magic treasures left behind from Master Cangkun's formidable opponents. Their might should be great. Even if only 70% of their might can be displayed after spending some time to refine them, it will certainly be worth it. As such, you may pick them in accordance to your desires. Fellow Daoists Wang Chan and Yang Ruyan, you will only be allocated 1 share." The old woman bluntly rushed to take advantage of her age and lay a claim, "As old as I am, how do I have the time to refine a magic treasure? It will be an ancient treasure, of course." The others didn't respond to her words, but they wryly laughed in their hearts. At that moment, Wang Tuangu spoke with Marquis Nanlong with a heavy tone, "Will fellow Daoists Nanlong and you not be taking first pick? There might not be any items you want on the second floor." Marquis Nanlong's expression grew sullen and he coldly said, "Brother Wang, what do you mean?" The white-clothed old man stared at Wang Tuangu with an unfriendly expression. Wang Tuangu turned a blind eye to this and chuckled, "It's nothing, I felt it would just be a pity if you decided to not take first pick with these treasures." With an icy expression, Marquis Nanlong snorted, "There is nothing here that fellow Daoist Yun and I wish to take using first priority. As for fellow Daoist Han, it will be his choice to decide whether or not he will use his privilege." He seemed to be greatly displeased with Wang Tuangu's words. Han Li rubbed his chin and casually said, "I also don't wish to use my privilege. I'll be keeping it for the second floor." Wang Tuangu spoke without reservation, "Since that is the case, we will divide the treasures evenly amongst us. If you want an ancient treasure, then you renounce the right to pick a magic treasures afterwards. Fellow Daoists, do you agree?" "That method is fine, I agree." "That is fine." The others felt this to be fair and each of them agreed. Of course, Han Li chose to renounce the magic treasures. As for the white-clothed old man and the tan man, they chose to renounce the ancient treasures. Instead, they each took 2 magic treasures and a share of the materials and medicine pills. As for the others, they each took a single ancient treasure. Han Li acquired a bamboo tube. Although he didn't know the level of its power or its abilities, he placed the item into his storage pouch without much care. He also took a share of the medicine pills and materials. Once Han Li and the others each took a single magic treasure, they finished distributing the items on the first floor. As for the praying mat, Han Li noticed that the white-clothed old man had already tossed it to the floor without paying it any further attention. It did indeed appear to be valuable. As for the yin focus herb, it seemed that many had recognized it, but none were interested. Han Li wryly chuckled in his mind. It seemed no one was fool enough to take it. These nascent soul eccentrics had examined everything present. After all, it was quite possible there were hidden treasures. Once these nascent soul eccentrics searched through the first floor once more, the party climbed up to the second floor without any unexpected discoveries, but when they arrived they were stunned by the sight. As soon as they entered the second floor, they were hit with a wave of incense. There was a small offering shrine at the top of the second floor stairs with a golden statue of a ferocious single-horned demon with 6 arms. It appeared aggressive and lifelike. There was a fire-red cauldron in front of the shrine that was emitting spirals of white smoke. It was the origin of the incense in the air. Marquis Nanlong and the others were shocked to see that Master Cangkun had enshrined a demon beast. But when Han Li saw the statue, Han Li felt his heart jump. The statue seemed to exactly the same as the demon beast in the sacred provenance plate. It even had the same fierce glare and 6 arms that were all raised to the heavens. Han Li then turned his gaze toward everything else on the second floor. About 10 meters away, he saw a common desk and chair. There was an ink slab, a brush, bamboo slips, and many other items. On the side opposite to the shrine, there was a blue jade bed. Although it was far away, he could faintly sense it emit a frigid aura as if it were carved from glacial jade. On top of the bed, there were 3 jade boxes that appeared rather eye-catching. It seemed the second floor was Master Cangkun's bedroom. In a blur, the white-clothed old man appeared at the side of the cold jade bed and took one of the jade boxes into his hand. Wait a moment. Soon after this was said, another silhouette appeared at the side of the bed. Their hand began to shine with black light and they pointed it at the old man's back. The white-clothed old man withdrew his wrist and avoided the sneak attack. In his alarmed fury, he glared at his attacker with hostility. What are you doing? You wish to exchange blows with me? The attacker with the fluttering robes was Wang Tuangu. Wang Tuangu calmly said, Brother Yun, please don't be so hasty. I merely wish to confirm whether or not fellow Daoist Yun wished to use his priority selection on this jade box and renounce the privilege on any other items. The white-clothed old man regained his calm, but he glared at Wang Tuangu nonetheless. Naturally, I want to take a look inside first. Why would I choose it if it were useless? Wang Tuangu wore a fearless expression and instead glanced at the 3 jade boxes on the jade bed. He calmly said, if I remember correctly, we agreed that you two would have first pick and we would evenly divide what was left over, but doesn't fellow Daoist believe that there will be enough to divide once the jade boxes are taken? What is fellow Daoist planning? Go ahead and say it. Do you plan on reneging on our agreement? Marquis Nanlong took several steps forward and stood alongside the old man. With a malicious expression, he swept his gaze past the 3 ghost spirit sect cultivators. Wang Tuangu smiled and calmly said, I have no intention of breaking my promise. However, there are far too few treasures on the second floor to be decided. Since the jade boxes cannot be seen through with spiritual sense, they are probably the most precious items in the building. Perhaps Master Cangkun's profound cultivation arts or even the secret of Devil Fall Valley lay within. Even under these circumstances, you two fellow Taoists wish to perceive their value before choosing the item. Isn't this excessive? The white-clothed old man excessive? I only recall that you fellow Taoists personally agreed to our conditions of priority selection. What does it have to do with us if there aren't enough items here? The old woman surprisingly backed Wang Tuangu. Those words can't be said. Fellow Taoists are allowed to have first pick with the items, but they can't examine what are within the boxes. If fellow Taoists are unsure, they may pick another item. For example, this glacial jade bed is a rather rare treasure. To cultivators with yin ice cultivation arts, it is a vastly precious treasure. Once that was said, Marquis Nanlong's expression became gloomy. He suddenly emitted an immense pressure that forced Wang Tuangu and the old woman to take a step back. At nascent soul stage, the difference in power between early and mid-stage wasn't something to underestimate. Marquis Nanlong narrowed his eyes and swept his gaze past the rest of the party with eyes as cold as a sword's edge. If there is anyone who believes fellow Daoist Wang's words to be reasonable, step forward. For Brother Wang to act so boldly, he should more than just Madam Tai supporting him. After a moment of silence, the Tan cultivator calmly said, Marquis Nanlong, there is no need to be angry. Brother Wang's words aren't without reason. Fellow Daoist can't just leave us with scraps. As for the stern-faced cultivator, he unconsciously frowned and hesitantly stood behind Wang Tuangu as if forgetting of their unfriendly relationship. Suddenly, apart from Han Li, the two parties stood in confrontation. Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man's expressions vastly changed. Marquis Nanlong instantly regained his calm and asked, "It seems you formed a group beforehand. Just when have you decided this? You shouldn't have had the opportunity on the way here." Wang Chenggu nonchalantly said, "It is impossible to have formed a group all at once. These fellow Daoists and I had a small meeting before we left. We talked about a few plans of self-preservation as well as any unexpected circumstances. This was one of the situations that we had anticipated. We now have no option but to write against fellow Daoists Nanlong and Yun." Marquis Nanlong's expression grew icy. His gaze soon landed on Han Li and he gravely asked, "Fellow Daoist Han, what will you do?" As of current, the two mid-nascent soul cultivators were standing in confrontation against for early nascent soul cultivators and two late core formation cultivators. From the balance of power, Han Li, who had yet to pick a side, had become a crucial point to the conflict. Han Li didn't immediately choose. He merely turned his head and calmly looked at Wang Chenggu's party, attempting to read their expressions the best he could. Not only did Wang Chenggu look at Han Li with a calm expression, but he also calmly smiled, revealing not a trace of worry. At his side, Wang Chan appeared excited and Yang Ruyan appeared to be at a loss. They didn't seem to know that Wang Chenggu and the others had formed an alliance beforehand. Lady Tai and the stern-faced cultivator didn't reveal the slightest alarm. They merely glanced at Han Li with an emotionless gaze. Han Li's heart thumped. He felt that something was amiss and he grew greatly vigilant. He casually took several steps away from either party and smiled, "I don't have an opinion. Regardless of whatever the outcome fellow Daoist Wang or brother Nanlong decides, I will not oppose it." Marquis Nanlong wasn't surprised by Han Li's words. Han Li had always displayed a neutral attitude. The question was merely verifying what the Marquis already suspected. Marquis Nanlong's expression relaxed and he nodded to Han Li. His gaze then turned towards Wang Chenggu and he coldly smiled as if about to speak. But at that moment, the white-clothed old man suddenly took a step forward and icily said, "Brother Nanlong, for what reason are you talking to them? Do these people truly believe that they will be able to cause us to succeed by joining hands? Delusional." Once this was said, he opened his mouth and spat out a shining white magic treasure. "Fellow Daoist Yun, wait. I am. You." Marquis Nanlong frowned and thought to stop the old man's rash actions as their changes of victory weren't entirely certain. They didn't expect that the old man would suddenly command the silver wheel to fly in his direction. A muffled peng sounded out. Under Marquis Nanlong's incredulous gaze, the silver wheel tore through the golden light protecting his body and directly struck his chest. Not only was he forced to take several steps back, but there was also a depression left in his chest. Marquis Nanlong responded with furious alarm. He flung his sleeve and shot a small golden blade from his palm towards the old man. But at that moment, the old man blurred and appeared at Wang Chenggu's side. He had raised his hand and commanded the silver wheel to block the golden sword. He then coldly glanced at Marquis Nanlong's chest. Beneath his torn robes, there was a layer of shining azure cloth armor. Although it had a deep depression, it was still in one piece. The old man's expression flickered and he expressionlessly muttered, "Azure rhino armor. As expected, you wore it on hand." Marquis Nanlong's cheek began to appear dark red and he stroked his chest, staring at the old man as he furiously spoke, "Good, very good. I didn't expect you to have been bought by them." Although their view was obstructed by blinding light, all could see that he was seriously injured. The old man ignored Marquis Nanlong as if he were a stranger and said, "Fellow Daoists, be careful. Do not let him leave this place alive. With his cultivation, we will attract no small amount of trouble." The stern-faced cultivator sinisterly smiled, "Relax. We have so many people on our side, and he is seriously injured. It will be impossible for him to escape." He then spat out a misty white flying saber from his mouth. At that moment, Wang Chenggu turned his head to Han Li and amiably said, "Fellow Daoist Han, if you help us deal with him, you'll receive a portion of his treasure. How about it?" He spoke sincerely as if ignoring the past hostilities that Han Li and Wang Chan shared. "Help you?" The previous scene came as a great shock to Han Li and his expression vastly changed. His eyes then turned towards the stairs. In the instant the old man attacked Marquis Nanlong, the old woman has silently guarded the staircase. Otherwise, Han Li would have already made his escape. Since the walls of the pavilion were flickering with white light, it was clear that it was under the effects of some formidable restriction and would be incapable of being broken through. Han Li didn't trust Wang Chenggu's proposal to group together. Surely Han Li would be next after Marquis Nanlong was eliminated. They would ve extended the offer to Han Li to join hands beforehand were this not the case. He reckoned that from the very start it had been decided for Han Li to die alongside Marquis Nanlong. With that thought, Han Li's expression remained calm as he attempted to agree with them for the time being. However, Marquis Nanlong scoffed and said, "Fellow Daoist Han, you can't honestly believe such a shallow trick. Although I don't know what methods fellow Daoist Wang used to entice the lot of them, my good friend of 100 years included, but if we join hands, there is hope for survival. But if we allow them to deal with us separately, we will certainly meet our doom." As Marquis Nanlong spoke, he brushed his hand past his chest. In a pulse of soft white light, the depression in the armor was restored back to normal. Wang Tuangu and the others were surprised, but the white-clothed old man calmly explained, "There is no need to be worried. He is merely using a secret technique to temporarily suppress his injuries. There is still lasting damage. But he will be troublesome together with that youngster Han. Have someone tangle him down for the time being. Kill Marquis Nanlong first." Once the old man finished, he unhurriedly pointed the silver wheel in front of him. The magic treasure immediately turned into a silver streak above his head. A mist of white light spread around his body, causing him to appear indistinct. Knowing that Marquis Nanlong held a bone-deep grudge against him, he wasn't about to hold back in the slightest. Wang Tuangu frowned and felt that this was reasonable. He turned his head to the stern-faced cultivator and said, "Brother Long, deal with that youngster for a moment. You don't need to try your hardest to kill him. Just keep him occupied. After we deal with Marquis Nanlong, we'll kill him together." Wang Tuangu icily glared at Han Li and no longer contained his killing intent. His body suddenly emitted a meter-tall black radiance, completely enveloping him in darkness. When the old woman and the Tan cultivator saw this, they each spat out their magic tools in preparation. The stern-faced cultivator chuckled and silently slipped out a milky white jade scepter from his sleeve. He then took several steps forward and mysteriously smiled at Han Li, "Not a problem. I'll deal with fellow Daoist Han." From his point of view, holding down a cultivator that had just entered nascent soul stage was a trivial affair. It was far safer than attempting to confront a mid-nascent soul cultivator. Han Li stared at the stern-faced cultivator and remained entirely still, but when he saw that the old woman had left the stairwell, his heart began to heavily thump. He tightly grabbed onto the ancient treasure that was hidden in his sleeve. At that moment, Marquis Nanlong swept his sleeve and sent out a mist of gold, sweeping the 3 jade boxes on the bed into his grasp. "Take it!" Marquis Nanlong tossed one of the jade boxes to Han Li without any hesitation. This action was greatly unexpected and none attempted to block it. Han Li easily caught the jade box with slight confusion on his face. With his arms behind his back, Marquis Nanlong explained, "Since fellow Daoist isn't following their wretched actions, I will give this jade box to you. If the box truly contains the secrets of Devil Fall Valley and fellow Daoist is able to make it out alive, it can be considered a fated chance." When the others heard this, their expressions vastly changed. Han Li glanced down at the jade box in his hand and licked his lips. He inwardly felt a desire to howl with laughter, but he managed to retain his calm with his exceeding force of will. The item that all the cultivators presently wished to acquire had fallen right into his hands. He found it hilarious. Of course, Marquis Nanlong hadn't done this out of kindness. Since the other side were determined to acquire the jade boxes, he gave a jade box to Han Li in order to divert their attention and create an opportunity for himself to escape. Marquis Nanlong was quite a decisive and formidable character to abandon a treasure that was already in his possess. But once Han Li realized that very treasure was in his hands, he couldn't help but inwardly laugh. Han Li flipped his hand without a thought and placed it away in a storage pouch. Wang Chenggu's expression grew sullen and he decisively ordered, "Chana, assist fellow Daoist Long with Ruyan. Do not allow that youngster Han the opportunity to escape. The others and I will be enough for the Marquis." He appeared calm and his reason wasn't overturned by his desire for the jade box. He merely sent the weakest among them to look after Han Li and paid him no more heed. When the others saw this, they grew tempted, but they all knew that so long as they could kill Marquis Nanlong first, Han Li was as good as theirs. "Yes, second uncle. I was already thinking of it." Wang Chan's eyes revealed a malicious expression and he sinisterly smiled. He then beckoned to Yang Ruyan and walked towards Han Li. A complicated expression flickered on Yang Ruyan's face for a moment and she silently followed after him. Han Li calmly glanced at the two without the slightest change in emotion. Han Li found it rather laughable. Although weapons were at the ready, the battle had yet to start on the other side. It wasn't due to any lingering sentiments, but due to caution. With Marquis Nanlong now a cornered beast, there was a change he might steel his resolve and decide to take one or two with them in mutual destruction. With the fear of a counterattack from a mid-nascent soul on death's door, they were each unwilling to be the first to strike in fear of receiving a fatal counterattack. Moreover, they weren't in the slightest rush. With Marquis Nanlong's wounds only worsening with time, the advantage laid with them. But bafflingly, Marquis Nanlong stood motionlessly in place as if he were unconcerned with his injuries. However, his red complexion was only growing brighter, nearly becoming the same shade as blood itself. This only caused Wang Tuangu and the others to appear more hesitant. In fear that the Marquis would employ a secret technique to muster the entirety of his strength, they each gazed at him from a distance with icy gazes. As for the stern-faced cultivator, he did indeed take the initiative to attack Han Li. His only goal was to tie him down. While Wang Chan held only the desire to kill Han Li as soon as possible, he lacked the cultivation to act. As such, the entire building was entirely peaceful despite the profuse killing intent that was present. Although the tiger appeared indistinct, it bared its ferocious fangs as soon as it appeared and instantly shot a beam of blazing white light towards the Black Mountain. With a loud rumble, the white light instantly engulfed a majority of the mountain. Wang Chan also reacted. He formed an incantation gesture with his hands, engulfing his body in a crimson mist. In that same moment, the stench of blood filled the air. As for Yang Ruyan, she also formed an incantation gesture and enveloped herself in crimson mist. However, she emitted an odd fragrance rather than the scent of blood. A whiff of it would cause one's mind to become dizzy and muddled. The stern-faced cultivator felt some relief at this. As he willed the white tiger to spit out another beam of light with his jade scepter, he slapped his storage pouch with his other hand, summoning an inch-large, faint blue good into his hand. Just as he was about to deploy the good, he suddenly heard a faint roll of thunder. In his alarm, he formed a hand incantation without any hesitation and formed a dense light barrier around him. At nearly that same time, a flash of silver lightning appeared at his side, revealing Han Li with silver wings emerging from his back. "Ah, you!" The stern-faced cultivator was greatly shocked, but as a result of his rich combat experience, he hastily raised the good in his hand and shot out a dazzling bolt of blue lightning. In the instant the blue lightning shot out, Han Li didn't dodge. Rather, he blankly opened his mouth, spitting out a thread of blue flame. The blue flames pierced through the white light barrier without the slightest resistance and shot towards the stern-faced cultivator. The meager wisp of blue flame was able to pass through the light barrier unobstructed, much to the surprise of the stern-faced cultivator. Lacking any time to dodge, the wisp of flame struck his neck. With a crackle, the stern-faced cultivator became entirely consumed in blue ice, forming a glistening ice sculpture. Much to the stern-faced cultivator's misfortune, Han Li had particularly directed the celestial ice flames to strike at his neck as a result of his experience from fighting the spell warrior. With his head frozen over, he had no opportunity to cast any techniques and change the outcome. In the same moment Han Li turned the stern-faced man into an ice sculpture, the blue lightning from the good struck Han Li before its thunder could sound out. But before it could strike Han Li's body, a net of faint gold lightning suddenly appeared on Han Li's body. In a flicker of golden light, the blue lightning was absorbed and disappeared from sight. Han Li then hesitantly reached forward and quickly snatched away the blue good. Han Li's use of the thunderstorm wings, the icing of the stern-faced cultivator surnamed Long, and the acquisition of the treasure took place in a mere instant. Just as Wang Chan had thought to step forward and assist the stern-faced cultivator, he witnessed his instantaneous defeat. Wang Chan could hardly believe what he just saw. When Han Li coldly glanced in his direction, Wang Chan responded without a thought. With fear in his voice, he yelled, "Cast together! Use the blood spirit arts to restrain him!" Once that was said, he grabbed onto Yang Ruyan's hand and hurriedly uttered an incantation. Crimson. When Han Li heard this, he swept his gaze to the other side. Marquis Nanlong and the others had yet to fight, but the others were staring at him with absolute. When the white-clothed old man saw their hesitation, he understood them perfectly. He also felt some fear towards Han Li's celestial ice flames. Moreover, if he were to leave this place to deal with Han Li, the Marquis may escape. Although Marquis Nanlong's injuries were severe, 3 early nascent soul cultivators didn't have much hope of remaining steadfast against his formidable secret techniques. He also found himself hesitant as to what to do. In a flash of lightning, Han Li appeared at the top of the stairs. He strangely smiled at Wang Tuangu and company before pointing to the Black Mountain. The Black Mountain trembled and disappeared in an instant, only to appear above them and dropping down with all its might. None had expected that Han Li would launch such a sudden attack, to their fury. However, even the white-clothed old man did indeed dare to take on the mountain's might alone. They could only helplessly dodge out of the way as the mountain fell down. This was finally the moment of Marquis Nanlong to strike. His eyes brightened and he transformed into a blinding streak of golden light, charging directly towards the old woman. In her fright, the old woman's body flashed with yellow light, summoning a small yellow shield to block the Marquis' approach. In an instant, gold and yellow, with pupils glowing with blue light, Han Li gazed at a certain portion of the mist. He raised his hand without any hesitation and black light began to surge through it. A dense mass of black-red light shot out from his palm towards the mist, discharging the Yin Devil execution. At the same moment, a wretched scream came from the blood mist. Han Li had already disappeared with a flash of lightning. Even if Wang Chan somehow managed to survive the strike, his injuries would be grave. While he did wish to take advantage of this opportunity to ensure Wang Chan's death, he was certain that Wang Tuangu would definitely come to Wang Chan's aid. When that moment came, he would be tied down in a battle against Wang Tuangu, attracting much danger onto himself. In any case, Han Li would always have the ability to kill a trifling late core formation cultivator like Wang Chang, so he had no need to risk danger now. As such, he immediately fled after making his attack. Han Li's figure appeared at the exit the building in a blur and flew straight towards the hall's entrance. Along the way, a white streak of light flew into Han Li's sleeve from the corner of the hall. It appeared to be a small white fox. "Master, I?" Silver Moon spoke with an excited tone. Han Li flew straight out the hall and gloomily interrupted, "Now is not the time to talk. Leave it for when we're out of danger." When Han Li broken through the wondrous soul restriction, Han Li deliberately used a flash of dazzling light to hide a gap in the restriction that he created. In that instant, he had Silver Moon go through. Afterwards, he deliberately stalled for time as he dissolved the formation. It was for this reason that Han Li had taken such efforts to break through the wondrous soul restriction, not on the mere basis of priority selection. From how excited Silver Moon appeared, it seemed she had reaped quite a bit of profit from the pavilion. Having taken the initiative to seize the treasures, Han Li had refused Marquis Nanlong's proposal to fight together and simply chose to prioritize his own escape.